Welcome back to Reimagine 2020. I'm Yonah Hochhauser, and today I'm glad to be joined by Roger Ver, founder of Bitcoin.com, crypto legend, amongst many other titles. Roger, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Yonah.
Now, first off, Roger, for those of who are viewers who, for some reason, don't know who you are, you want to give a quick background, kind of who you are and how you got into blockchain.
Sure. I was much younger when I got into blockchain. It's been almost 10 years now, but basically I was the first person that had any sort of capital to get excited about this space. So I had my own business in Silicon Valley, heard about Bitcoin, dropped everything to start focusing on that. And so I basically funded the entire first generation of Bitcoin businesses. And back then it was only Bitcoin businesses. It wasn't cryptocurrency. It was just Bitcoin and Bitcoin wallets and Bitcoin exchanges. And so these are companies that people would have heard of today, like BitPay and Kraken and blockchain.com. Purse.io, of course. Then a lot of people don't know it. I was actually the second person ever involved in Ripple as well. So Jed McCaleb came up with the idea and then approached me and said, I think Bitcoin mining is a waste where we can make Bitcoin that doesn't require mining. Are you willing to fund to make that happen? So I said, sure, let's give that a try. So actually I helped start Ripple as well. And then a number of other cryptocurrencies out there. And I've been involved in the space full time for almost exactly a decade now.
Wow. I mean, that is a great ground floor, a list of ground floors to get in on. I mean, people talk about Warren Buffett. I think you might be Warren Buffett 2.0 in terms of you just getting in on great investments. So kudos to you. But if we're going to be talking, right now, we got to mention, you've always been a strong proponent of Bitcoin Cash and the idea of Bitcoin being an electronic peer-to-peer network or peer-to-peer cash network. But the network recently underwent a hard fork. And that hard fork was over a mining tax of 8%. Essentially, Bitcoin ABC wanted to tax the miners 8% and put that into a development fund. You were against that, and your side actually won by quite a large margin. Talk us through a little bit why you were against the mining tax and kind of, did you get much pushback? I mean, it seems like it was overwhelmingly the Bitcoin Cash community sided with you in this matter.
Yeah, I initially had a pretty open mind about it. And then I don't think so much the problem was diverting. And there certainly was a problem with it, but the small part of the problem was diverting part of the block reward to pay for development within the ecosystem. The big part of the problem is who decides and how do they decide how that money gets spent? And there wasn't any sort of way to figure that out. And that was a real big problem, I think. And it just was going to lead to a never-ending amount of infighting. And the money was going to wind up going to those that were the most effective at political lobbying rather than those that were building the most effective platforms to bring more economic freedom and to the world and more peer-to-peer electronic cash useful things to the world. And I think an example of that is Bitcoin.com inarguably has done a huge amount to bring more people to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin Cash specifically than just about any other website. Yet these developers are saying, oh, Bitcoin.com shouldn't get any money. They have the most money already, so they don't need it. Well, the fact that we already have a bunch of money shows that we've been effective with the resources that we've had available. And so that's the problem with government entities. If a government entity does a bad job, they get more money. If a private business does a bad job, they get less money and they go out of business. And those resources wind up being allocated to people that use it more effectively. And so it's basically bringing central planning and socialism to Bitcoin Cash. And the entire point of cryptocurrencies is to let people opt out of those centrally commanded and controlled economic systems and allow people to be able to do whatever they want with their own money. And so I think it was a really bad idea, and it was sad that it caused infighting within the cryptocurrency community. And the really shocking part is that the people that were in favor of this central planning and central diversion of part of the block reward were then trying to call the people that were opposed to it, the central planners, and Bolsheviks was the name that they came up with, which was a play on Bitcoin and Bolsheviks, I guess. But it just seems really strange that people think that that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, and I've been saying this since 2011, if something better than Bitcoin comes along, great. If something better than Bitcoin Cash comes along, great. I'm going to promote whatever option I think has the best chance of bringing more economic freedom to the entire world. And that's why I'm so bullish about Bitcoin Cash today, is it works for super fast, super cheap, super reliable payments for every single person on the planet, whether you're young or old, rich or poor, black or white. It works for everybody right now today. You don't have to wait for some other future technology to come into existence. Bitcoin Cash works today, and that's what has me so excited about it.
Mm-hmm. And so you're not necessarily against the mining tax, but more who controls and decides that fund. Was a DAO not considered to help manage that? If let's say there was a DAO and all Bitcoin Cash holders were able to vote and allocate those funds, would that be a better solution, or solution you'd be willing to get behind?
I think the other big part of the problem is that Bitcoin Cash definitely is one of the versions of Bitcoin. And if you signed up for Bitcoin peer-to-peer electronic cash, it didn't have part of the block reward going to pay for that sort of thing. It would be a big giant change from the social contract there. And even these, various DAOs out there, they pretend that they're decentralized autonomous organizations, but there's still a bunch of people arguing and politicking for what the future roadmap's going to be. So it's not any more of a DAO than, your local, state government is a DAO, like kind of, but not really. So, and the more I thought about it, the more it just seemed like a bad idea to me.
But I mean, essentially, what's happening is a DAO, by the miners and the node runners, because they're essentially voting with which node to run. So essentially, it took the choice out of the Bitcoin Cash holders and put the choice into the miners and the node operators. Is that who you feel is the best representation of the community, or the best way to make the decisions?
No, but I don't think we've necessarily found the best way. Maybe we found the best way at the moment, but that doesn't mean that next week we won't find an even better way. And the nice part about being a cryptocurrency holder, if I don't like what the Bitcoin Cash development team is or roadmap is, I can sell my Bitcoin Cash for Ethereum or Monero or take your pick. Or even, I'm not going to do this because it would be stupid, but I could even sell back into Bitcoin if I thought that was a good idea. I think at this point we just see a bunch of people saying, oh, the number's going up. Monkey see, monkey do. Everyone else is buying Bitcoin. I'm going to buy that one too. But if you look at the fundamental characteristics of what made Bitcoin popular to begin with, it has none of that today. It has slow, expensive, unreliable transactions. It's a joke. I would be embarrassed to try and promote Bitcoin to people today. And all the Bitcoin maximalists are going to be mad that I say that. But look at it objectively. What does Bitcoin have going for it? It has the Bitcoin name recognition, and that's it. The user experience is horrible. I would much rather buy Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, or 1,000 other altcoins out there at this point. I think it should be embarrassing to the cryptocurrency community that they're pushing Bitcoin so hard when the user experience is that bad today. It's just really really sad that you see so many people that they're chasing the dollar sign because they think, oh, I already have Bitcoin. If I can convince everybody else to buy it, the price will go up and I can buy a Lambo. Well, I sold my Lamborghini that I had before Bitcoin had ever even been invented. I sold it in 2012 to buy more Bitcoin. Today, I'm more interested in Bitcoin Cash because it actually works to bring more economic freedom to people all over the world, whether you're in South Africa or North America or here in Antigua in the Caribbean. It's for everybody.
But why does it have to be an either or game? Can't it be that when you want to do transactions, when you want an electronic peer-to-peer cash, you use Bitcoin Cash. When you want something that maybe be a little more speculative or a little more holding its value, use Bitcoin Core. And if you want to deal with banks, you use XRP. I mean, why does it have to be this this all or nothing game?
It doesn't have to be. It just naturally tends to be that way. So money is the most commonly used medium of exchange. And so money also becomes a store of value. So in South Africa, where everyone's using the South African rand, everybody stores their savings in the South African rand. In America, where everyone uses the US dollar for payments, they use the US dollar to save their money. In Europe, they use the euro because you can pay for it everywhere. I can't think of a single country anywhere in which the most commonly used method of payment isn't also what the most commonly used store of value. So if Bitcoin Cash winds up being used commonly for payments all over the place, it's going to become the store of value cryptocurrency as well. And that was what had me, ringing the alarm bell about Bitcoin. When they started undermining its usefulness for payments, they were undermining its usefulness as a store of value as well. And so that's why I'm so much more bullish on cryptocurrencies that actually function as cash, and they're going after trying to have people actually using them in commerce. And if you look at Bitcoin Cash, it's accepted at more physical merchants around the world today than Bitcoin, and probably accepted at more online merchants than Bitcoin at this point. So it's just a matter of time until the mass public wakes up and realizes, wait a minute, I can do the exact same thing, but faster, cheaper, and more reliably with Bitcoin Cash than I can with Bitcoin. Those people are going to start using Bitcoin Cash as their store of value. And once people see the Bitcoin Cash price start going up in relation to Bitcoin, there's plenty of monkey see, monkey do people in the world. They're all going to pile on, and they're going to start buying their Bitcoin Cash as well.
Well, I'm kind of taken aback or a little shocked to hear of a proof from you, a proof of something working was looking at the traditional markets, the traditional countries, just because right now the system with fiat that they do, the same money that you use to spend is the money you save in. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what the best method will be going forwards. Now that we have blockchain, now that we have other options, I mean, clearly you're a big proponent of Bitcoin Cash, and I understand why. You think, or what you value is electronic peer-to-peer cash system, just like Satoshi wrote in his white paper. But that doesn't necessarily have to be, one isn't necessarily a thing that everyone's looking for. For instance, my siblings, they're not into crypto. They don't know about crypto. And they always ask me, what crypto should I buy? And I tell them honestly, I say, it really depends on what you're looking for with your purchase. Are you looking for a electronic peer-to-peer cash you could spend? Are you looking for something speculative? Are you hoping maybe to take a risk, make some money? Are you looking for something that gives you governance and control over a project that could potentially change the way finance works? So I guess I'm not a maximalist, if you would say. I really do, look at things on a use case by use case level. But when we're talking about Bitcoin Cash, it's interesting because we had a hard fork, the community voted, and I love seeing that. It's proof that it works. When a big issue comes up like this, what do we do? Do we mine? Do we mining tax? Do we not mining tax? And then the community decides. The community decided against it, and it's healthy now. The price is stable. It's doing good, and that's what makes me excited and optimistic for this technology. But recently, there was actually a 51% attack on the Bitcoin Cash network, run essentially by volunteerism.dev. This anonymous group of old guard miners in Wales launched this attack, not necessarily nefariously, but to prove a point.
And I should clarify one thing. You said that was done on the ABC chain, not the Bitcoin Cash chain. Exactly.
You're right. This was done on the ABC chain that actually adopted the mining tax, not the Bitcoin Cash network. And it wasn't done to take over, to make any changes. It was actually done just to prove a point. And there are many people involved here. Were you involved at all in that?
No, I was not involved in that in any way. The really kind of interesting or funny sense of humor part of it is that Omri Sachet wanted 8% of the block reward to go directly to his own wallet. So this voluntarist.dev or whatever the Twitter handle is there, they said, oh, you want 8%? We're going to give you 100%. So they mined a whole bunch of blocks and gave 100% of each block directly to Omri there. And I think I can see what's going on here is that lots of people, and understandably, are very, very upset with the way Omri and ABC behaved and some of the things that went on there. But I think at this point, it would be better if everybody just goes their own separate way and just focuses on building their own tools and their own ecosystem in the very best way they know how and can, and just leave every other chain alone and just focus on the things that you're interested in yourself.
Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about blockchain and this technology that still is pretty much in its infancy, and we do all recognize that development and further development usually is for the better, to fix bugs, improvements, make things faster, make changes when necessary, if necessary. But as we see, like you mentioned, this was a pretty big developer who forked off. Bitcoin Cash forked off from Bitcoin SV back in the day, and Bitcoin Cash forked off from Bitcoin Core back in the day. So do you feel that all the splintering, while everyone could choose their own thing, but do you think that this is kind of like a brain drain, where if we keep on splintering the Bitcoin, all the different Bitcoin communities into smaller and smaller communities, we're actually diluting the talent pool that is necessary to develop on the network?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that makes money useful is the size of its network effect. And so that's one of the things I think why Bitcoin still has the top spot today, is the size of its network effect. But the real winner in all this, I think, is going to be Ethereum. They've only had one split like that, where Ethereum Classic split off, but it was a very small percentage there. And if you go and look at the Ethereum ecosystem, the amount of developer brain power and talent and things going on in that ecosystem are really incredible. And so I'm really bullish. And I said it years ago, and I'll say it again now. I think Ethereum is going to be the first one to supplant Bitcoin in terms of market cap. And I think Bitcoin Cash will do it there in the future as well, just because the user experience is so much better. And sorry, there's a fly buzzing me at the moment.
It's okay.
But you can see it happening out there. It's really, really amazing thing when the ecosystems are together and are cohesive and growing and building and bringing on more users. And when you have infighting and splintering and that sort of thing, it's bad. And so it was a disaster for Bitcoin Cash when it split into BCH and BSV. And even this most recent split wasn't a good thing. But that's part of the thing with permissionless cryptocurrencies there, is that you have to have the ability to split. You have to have the freedom to do that. And when you disagree, you can fork off. And it's important that people be able to do that. And people can and will in the future as well. So.
Mm-hmm. So, going back to Bitcoin Cash, the main idea behind it is this electronic peer-to-peer cash network, where you could actually spend, where you could go to a store and you could merchant, you could actually on the spot buy. You don't have to wait 10 minutes for approval. But one of the things that people look for when it comes to a currency that they could buy with, and one of the knocks against fiat currency is this idea that the government could control the supply. They could print endlessly the fiat currencies, and what that could do is that could instantly devalue the currency. And so, a dollar that one day buys you milk, the next week you need $1 million to buy that same milk. But when we're talking about Bitcoin Cash, and really this is something that affects all cryptocurrencies. This is not only Bitcoin Cash, but all cryptocurrencies right now, due to the speculative nature of the market, the value fluctuates quite greatly. And don't you think that really affects its ability to be used as a means of transaction, a means of purchase? If I'm a merchant, I want stability. I want to know that if I'm getting paid 15 Bitcoin Cash today, that's still worth something, or still worth, relatively the same amount as it will be in a week. So, how big of an issue is the fact that there isn't really a cryptocurrency besides stable coins that really keeps a relatively stable value? And what is the solution to that?
Yeah, I think stable coins are part of the solution. That's why we see Tether is the #1 traded cryptocurrency in the world at this point. But then there's other really cool tools to build stable coins where the only underlying asset of the stable coin is the cryptocurrency itself. So like Bitcoin Cash has that coming with a project called AnyHedge, and it's either anyhedge.com or .org, and you can see how that works. And so you can lock in $100 worth of Bitcoin Cash today. When you're ready to move it, you'll still get back $100 worth of Bitcoin Cash no matter where the price does. And this is all done on chain in a permissionless way. And so that's a really big deal and a really useful tool, because then you'll no longer be at the mercy of governments. It's not just that they can print extra dollars, it's that they do all the time. And I was born in 1979. In 1983, so within my lifetime, and everybody loves to make jokes about the Zimbabwe dollar now. You can buy $1 trillion or $100 trillion Zimbabwe note for a couple of US dollars at the moment. But within my lifetime, in 1983, one single Zimbabwe dollar was worth more than one US dollar. And so that's just an example of how quickly things can change. And don't think that it can't happen to the euro or the US dollar or any of these other currencies out there. It can, and at some point it most likely will. And that's one of the beautiful benefits about these cryptocurrencies, is that we know what the supply is going to be. And that makes them very, very attractive, not just for use in commerce, but as a store of value as well. But the people are going to, and actually, if I can circle back to that, maybe they'll use this thing for a store of value and they'll use another one for spending. It's not that it couldn't be that way. It's in human nature to want to use the store of value that they're also using to spend everywhere. So like I read about this in the economics theoretical books. So you can go and pick up some Mises or Rothbard or Menger and read on these topics. But a real life, empirical proof was my time in federal prison. There's money in prison, but it's not dollars. People use tobacco, postage stamps, and Top Ramen soups as their stores of value. And the reason they use those as the stores of value is because it's also the money. And it's also the money because they have some other use case. You can smoke them or eat them or mail a letter with them. And so people weren't using something other than the things that they were using as payments as the store of value. The store of value is the same thing that they're using for payments. And the same is going to wind up being true for cryptocurrency. The same thing that people are using for payments is going to be what they wind up using as a store of value. And maybe people will wind up using Bitcoin as that. And Bitcoin will be held in custodial accounts, and it'll be no different than your regular old bank account. And maybe they'll do fractional reserve stuff on that. But that would be a huge, huge, huge missed opportunity for the entire world, in which we could have wound up shifting to a system in which each individual has custody of their own funds and control of their own funds, and doesn't need permission from anybody. To instead, the entire world is using a system not all that different than what we have today with the dollars. Instead, it's using Bitcoin, but don't think that they won't pull fractional reserve stuff with you on that. We've already seen it happen with Mt. Gox. They were running fractional reserve for who knows how many years and hit it from the entire world, and including myself, from that. And it's happened with a bunch of other Bitcoin businesses as well. So that's why it's so important for people to, at the very least, have the ability to transact on chain and hold their cryptocurrency themselves. And again, I think the cryptocurrency that will wind up being used as a store of value is the same one that they're using in commerce, is the medium of exchange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's my fear as well. That even though we have this new technology that does allow us to have the control to actually own our own money and have control, and we know the supply and it's all in our hands. And yet I fear that just inevitably history will repeat itself, and And there's people like, well, a lot of people don't know, they don't want, they're scared, it's too confusing to hold custody, so they give it to a centralized exchange or a custody service. And then eventually it's a slippery slope until we end up,
Back where we started.
Exactly, which would be so unfortunate because, this is a new technology. But luckily, the thing that once again does give me this optimism is that we have the choice. Even if it does go to fractional reserve, and even if a whole chain goes fractional reserve or goes custodial, we could fork it and we can make it not. We could make it pure again. And I think that's the greatest thing here is this idea of choice that allows a free market to really take effect. And I hope it continues to do that way. And you mentioned prisons. And yeah, that is a fact I actually learned recently about the ramen noodles. The not ramen soups are quite popular, and that's the transactional value of prisons. Is it possible as a prisoner to trade any cryptocurrencies? I mean, do you have access to internet? I mean, you're kind of locked out of this whole world, right?
Yeah, so I'm glad to say this was 20 years ago for myself, and at that time there was no access to internet or email or anything like that. More recently, people, I guess, do have some limited access to an email system to send messages back and forth. But actually, you know what? If you're in a minimum security facility, which is where I'm not, you're not allowed to have a cell phone, but everybody has cell phones, and they use the cell phones are all encrypted. And then even if the guard finds one of the cell phones, they can't decrypt it, so they don't know whose cell phone it was. And so almost all the prisoners are running around with cell phones in the minimum security facilities. And even in some of the higher security facilities, some inmates will have cell phones as well. So I suppose some people could use cryptocurrency that way, but mainly it's the things that are useful to you right there. And it's actually really amazing and impressive to see the ingenuity of the human spirit there, where technically it's against the rules for you to buy or sell or trade anything with anybody. Yet an entire economy forms where people are, cooking for other people, or doing laundry, or polishing shoes, or doing absolutely anything and everything in there for money in prison. So the whole natural economy just springs to life, and it made me very, very, very confident that the money that people are using as a medium of exchange is also the money that people are going to use as a store of value, from what I saw in prison and from having studied, economics for a large portion of my life as well.
And that often happens, that the black market is usually more of a free market than the actual mainstream market. And I think that goes to show you, like you mentioned, the human nature, and hopefully that free markets will always prevail. But so essentially what we have in our hands here with Bitcoin Cash, and like you mentioned, it's quick, it's cheap, it's
reliable.
It's a good, reliable user experience. So why isn't it more widespread? I mean, if people are going to inevitably end up at the product that is the best, the cheapest, the easiest, yada yada yada, why is it not taken off in terms of acceptance, in terms of adoption? When you go, I know I see on your Twitter, you go and you do the groundwork. You're going to merchants, you're going to restaurants, and you're getting them to start accepting Bitcoin Cash. But what's the biggest hurdle you face when you go to merchants and you explain to them, you try to get them to accept it? What's the biggest no, or reason for no that you hear?
I think the problem or the situation here is the same as Bitcoin was in 2011. People don't know about how good it is and how amazing it is and how well it works. But it's starting to get more and more traction. I'm here talking to you from the country of Antigua. You can spend Bitcoin Cash. You can't spend Bitcoin, but you can spend Bitcoin Cash at around 50 different places in the country. And like, that doesn't sound like a lot necessarily, other than you realize that the entire population of the country is around 80,000 people. So 50 merchants is a huge percentage of the country here, including one of the gas stations here, of maybe less than 10 gas stations probably in the entire country. So you can spend Bitcoin Cash at 10% of the gas stations in the entire country. And if you want to become a citizen here, you can pay for the entire thing in Bitcoin Cash directly to the government. You can visit antiguahelp.com for more information on that. You don't have any crypto capital gains tax here. You don't even have an income tax here. You don't even have to file an income tax form at the end of the year. So it's a real crypto haven. If you want to be my neighbor, come on down to Antigua. You can spend Bitcoin Cash anywhere and everywhere here. And it's really the talk of the entire country at this point. We have the guys from gocrypto.com down here helping set up the merchants. They're not having to knock on doors and saying, hey, would you like to start accepting crypto? The merchants are coming to them and they said, hey, my friend with this other business down the street started accepting Bitcoin Cash. Why can't you help me do that too? And they said, well, we will help you do that too. So it's really spreading. And we have one of the first major businesses here is about to start doing their payroll in Bitcoin Cash for people here. So they're going to offer all their employees the ability to have part of their payroll done in Bitcoin Cash. So it's really spreading. And I think the rest of the world hasn't really caught on yet. just how much better Bitcoin Cash is than Bitcoin, not just as a medium of exchange, but for a long-term store of value as well. So everybody thinks I'm a crypto legend because I went and bought a bunch of Bitcoin when they were less than $1 each and told everybody how amazing this is and how people are going to use it. They're going to think I'm doubly a legend when they see the same thing happen with Bitcoin Cash here in the future. It's so clear. You have the adoption from BitPay. You have the adoption from Grow Crypto. You have the Bitcoin.com wallet. You have Grayscales. Bitcoin Cash Trust is trading at 12 times the value. Bitcoin Cash and the Grayscale Trust is trading at over $3,000 per Bitcoin Cash at the moment. I think actually might have been over $4,000 earlier this week. That's a really big deal. So it's trading for about 1/5 the price of Bitcoin. And that's going to change as more and more people pile money into that. There's going to be a flippening at some point on this. And Ethereum, more power to them. They have an awesome community, but they have their own technological scaling issues they're dealing with at the moment. And I'm hopeful about ETH 2.0, but it's not here yet. And there's still a lot of work to be done. Bitcoin Cash can scale for the whole world basically right now today. It is ready to go. And that's why we saw it. PayPal recently integrated cryptocurrencies for their 350 million users. There were only 4 that made the cut, right? Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum and Litecoin. And Bitcoin Cash is the one that's in there with the biggest network effect that's ready to really take advantage of that. And so I think the smart money is already on Bitcoin Cash, as we can see from the values there in the Grayscale Trust and elsewhere. So.
Well, I think a lot of that acceptance, a lot of that adoption, a lot of that widespread appeal of Bitcoin Cash is because they have the best hype man behind them, which is you. I mean, I'm sure you really are. You talk it up. I'm sure you're every restaurant or any place you go to that doesn't accept Bitcoin Cash, you probably sit there and explain to them from the beginning exactly why they should be accepting it. I wish I had you hyping me up as my personal hype man. I think I'd be very successful going through life if I had a Roger Ver behind me. But you mentioned this idea that there might be a flippening at some point where the Bitcoin Cash actually overtakes Bitcoin Core, whether it be in value, in usage, in transactions, whatever it may be, that flippening when it becomes the Bitcoin. So at that point, when Bitcoin Cash does, that flipping happens, and Bitcoin Cash is now called Bitcoin. It's back to the original Bitcoin. What would you call then the Bitcoin that is now? What would you name that?
I don't think the name will actually flip at this point, but I think the market share, market cap, and mind share, and merchant adoption and adoption around the world will flip. There's no way that Bitcoin can continue with that with its bad user experience. Maybe some banks will use it and this and that for something or other, but I think even that's unlikely in the long term. The one that works for everybody all the time, cheaply, fastly, and reliable, that's going to wind up being the one for the world. So will the name change and Bitcoin? Actually, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong about that, because I noticed here in Antigua, everybody's using Bitcoin Cash, but all these even though I explained to them very clearly, everyone's just calling it Bitcoin. They say, hey, can you pay me in Bitcoin? And they pay each other in Bitcoin Cash, but everyone's just calling it Bitcoin. So maybe someday when Bitcoin Cash is the main payment method that's used for everybody worldwide, maybe they're all just going to wind up calling it Bitcoin anyhow. And I heard the same thing's happening down in Australia. There's a big giant Bitcoin Cash ecosystem where people are buying and selling and paying employees and doing everything in Bitcoin Cash, but they're all just calling it Bitcoin. And if you haven't seen how easy it is, check out the Bitcoin Cash Register app. You can download it and start accepting Bitcoin Cash at your business in 30 seconds. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to give your email. You don't have to give your tax ID number. It works for everybody right now today. It's called the Bitcoin Cash Register app. And that's an app that used to be on Bitcoin, but stopped being possible on Bitcoin because the blocks became full and the fees became high. And so now it's an app on top of Bitcoin Cash.
And part of the way of paying with Bitcoin Cash, you want it to be quick. So right now you scan a QR code instead of having to type manually in the wallet address, which is a random string of numbers and letters. You scan a QR code. My question is, why is there not, or when will there be NFT tap and pay integration? Right now, if you're using a traditional payment or even on your phone, if I go to the store, I'm not using a credit card. I'm just tapping my phone. When are we going to be able to tap the phone instead of scanning QR codes to pay with Bitcoin Cash?
Yeah, there's already samples of that online. You can see it. There's a guy named Tobias Ruck, and it's called be.cash is his website. And he's demonstrating that already right now today. It's a really cool technology. I'd love to see that out in the wild in action, but right now it's just being tested. But I think at some point it'll get there.
And you mentioned in your last answer this idea that PayPal only accepted 4 cryptocurrencies, and Bitcoin Cash being one of them. But I wonder what your feelings were on that, because at the end of the day, if you read the fine print, PayPal's not actually giving you access to your keys. You can't even take the crypto off the platform. It's essentially just exposure. It's like an ETF. It's exposure to the underlying asset. So, are you, I'm asking you because I know you probably have unique opinions on this. How big of a deal is this for you? Is this more of like a marketing, a branding thing that now Bitcoin is a little more in Bitcoin Cash or mainstream? Or is this actually something bigger than that?
I think it's a huge deal. 350 million PayPal users now have the ability to hold the asset. And I think at some point that PayPal will allow you to move the assets off the platform. And when that happens, that's when Bitcoin Cash will really shine, because people will say, oh, if I move the Bitcoin off my out of my PayPal wallet, hold on one second, then there's like a $9 fee to do that. Otherwise, can you take that call? They'll say I have to pay $9 to move my Bitcoin. Otherwise, if I move Bitcoin Cash, I have to pay a ninth of a penny. People are going to wake up real quick and say, well, why would I want to use Bitcoin and pay an extra $9 per transaction to move my money outside of PayPal when I can do it basically for free on Bitcoin Cash? And so I think that's when you're really going to see a lot of mind share pop over to Bitcoin Cash there. And there's a number of people that have reached out to me and said, oh my God, I tried actually making a payment with Bitcoin. How could anybody ever use this? And then it's just shocking to me. A lot of people in the space are aware of Andreas Antonopoulos. I gave him what I think was his first job ever being paid in Bitcoin in the space back in 2012 or 13. We hired him at blockchain.com back when it was blockchain.info and paid him in Bitcoin there. He didn't hold on to much of it at all because apparently whatever reasons. But he was just saying on Twitter yesterday that he did his current payroll in Bitcoin, and he lowballed the fee and did a batch SegWit transaction and then waited 4 blocks. Then he had to watch and monitor to see if he had to bump up the fee to make it go through later. Who in their right mind is going to deal with any of that? Business owners are so busy already, they're not going to mess with any of that. And it just seemed shocking to me, like nobody in their right mind is going to deal with that. It has to work, and it has to work fast, cheaply, reliably, and consistently all the time, year after year. People don't want to have to deal with any of that stuff. Like it seemed like it was like an April Fool's Day joke that he would even post something like that on Twitter and claim that that's a good thing for Bitcoin. It's an absolute disastrous joke for the adoption of Bitcoin that it would be that complicated and that hard to use. Nobody's going to use that. They're going to use something that works fast, cheaply, and reliably, and it sure isn't Bitcoin at this point.
And the thing that actually enables that is the raised block limit, or I don't even know if there even is a block limit anymore in Bitcoin Cash. You probably know better than I. But as adoption happens, let's say everyone tomorrow realizes that the better, how much better Bitcoin Cash is cheaper, more reliable, quicker. What is the ceiling in terms of the network? If everyone starts using it now for transactions, are you able to just simply raise that block limit, or is there even a hard ceiling on the ability of the network to actually handle transactions as a cash?
Yeah. As Satoshi Nakamoto himself said in 2009 or 10, Bitcoin never really hits a scaling ceiling. And that's true about Bitcoin Cash. It's no longer true about BTC. An artificial scaling ceiling was imposed from the outside using censorship and propaganda, but that's a whole other story out there. At this point, Bitcoin Cash can scale to be the money for the entire world. And that's the other wonderfully attractive part about it for investors. If you just want to be a speculative person that makes a buck, Bitcoin Cash is way more attractive. Bitcoin Cash could go up 1,000 times in price from where it is today by becoming money for the entire world. Bitcoin's not even going to go up, even to go up 10 times from where it is today seems really, really unlikely. Bitcoin Cash very realistically could go up 1,000 times from where it is today. Bitcoin isn't. So from an investor standpoint, Bitcoin Cash is much, much, much more attractive as well.
And then, so we're talking about price, because that does seem to be the way that we kind of judge the success or failure of cryptocurrencies, because it's such a speculative market today. When did you feel validated? Every time we mentioned how many times the Bitcoin community has split. Do you feel validated every time you check your coin market cap or whatever app it is, and you see the BCH price higher than BSV and Bitcoin ABC, because that essentially means that the market says we think that Bitcoin Cash is more valuable and has made the correct move more than BSV or ABC?
No, I'm not really worried about any of that at all. The Bitcoin market cap is much higher than Bitcoin Cash, but I think people are just mistaken. They're not fully understanding that there. So, I've talked with a number of people out there, people that have hundreds of millions or maybe $1 billion more worth of crypto out there, and this isn't their fault, because usually people that have that much in the way of assets are, you know, a bit older generation, but you know, namespaces in the space, they didn't understand the difference between a wallet in which the user has their private keys themselves and they're an account where somebody else is holding the private keys for them. And these are people with, you know, probably more than $1 billion worth of cryptocurrency, at the very least hundreds of millions of dollars. And so I spoke with them and explained the difference to them, and then they wound up buying more Bitcoin Cash. They bought millions more dollars worth of Bitcoin Cash after I explained the difference to them. And it's their story to tell, but they're out there and they're starting to wake up. And I think more and more people will start to figure it out. If everyone's just using a custodial account, well, what did we even need cryptocurrency for at that point? You might as well just go back to using the dollars in your bank account or your PayPal account or whatever else out there. Whereas you need to be able to transact on chain for it to be, you know, revolutionary for the world, to bring more economic freedom to the world and bring the benefits of cryptocurrencies to the world. So people are going to figure that out. And at some point, everyone loves to chase the rising star. When people see Bitcoin Cash rising, they're going to pile in. And they'll, you know, piggyback, and that'll bring more and more and more, and then everybody will be, you know, a rush for the exit there at some point. Once people figure out that the Bitcoin emperor has no clothes, it's just Bitcoin in name only. Bitcoin Cash can be money for the world. Bitcoin has sadly decided not to be.
And we're talking about new monies for the world and economic freedom. Right now, a lot of, even if you have cash and you're holding cash in your hand, there's this financial system, this financial infrastructure. You know, if I want to get a loan, I have to go to a bank. If I want to borrow, there's kind of these centralized, even if you're utilizing, let's say, even somehow you have a currency that isn't controlled by the government, still the system the pipeline, the infrastructure that allows money to move is still centralized. And since this past summer, DeFi has really risen using the building blocks of Bitcoin Cash, of Ethereum, and these new technologies. To start offering more advanced products, more financial products and tools that people could actually use to use with their cryptocurrencies and put their cryptocurrencies to work. And so I want to get your thoughts on DeFi, because, you know, in the summer it was all yield farming, you know, which was its own thing. But now we're starting to slowly see, you know, more, I would say more useful or more valuable tools with the lending protocols and borrowing and insurance. So when you're looking at DeFi, what's your thoughts on DeFi overall? And what's the project or segment of DeFi that you're most excited about going forward?
Yeah, I think the key there is to build them in decentralized, permissionless ways. And so early on in Bitcoin, I don't know, maybe 2012 or 2013, there was this really cool website called gblse.com. And it stood for the Global Bitcoin Stock Exchange. And it was exactly what the name says. It was a global Bitcoin stock exchange, and people were trading stocks of cryptocurrency companies. So there was some ASIC miner run by a guy who's, I think the English translation of his name was Fried Cat. Maybe in Chinese that sounds more attractive, but he was running a big ASIC mining operation and paying dividends to all the shareholders. You could buy Satoshi Dice ownership there, I think Feed the Birds and a bunch of other weird stuff out there. And millions or tens of millions of dollars a day worth of trades were happening on this platform. And all the stock prices were denominated in Bitcoin. And it was a really powerful tool where we were starting to see an entire stock market taking place on top of Bitcoin. But it was a centralized platform that was keeping track of it. And the guy that was running it all was some guy out of the UK. And all of a sudden one day he got a threatening letter from strangers in the mail calling themselves the English government. And they said, you better stop what you're doing or we're going to hurt you, essentially. And so he stopped what he was doing and shut down the website. And now the world has kind of been looking for something else like that. But I think if we can build it in a decentralized, unstoppable way where there's not some single person to send this threatening letter to, this is going to be a really, really big deal. And one of my favorite things that I saw in regards to that was, or actually built, was this dividend payment tool on top of Bitcoin Cash, where you can issue your token on top of Bitcoin Cash, and then you can make anonymous dividend payments in Tether or Bitcoin Cash or any other token on top of Bitcoin Cash to anybody out there in the world, just like that. It's a really, really big deal. So I would love to see, from a philosophical standpoint, I want to see a darknet market have an IPO and then sell shares in their darknet market and then pay dividends to all their token holders out there in the world. We saw with Ross Ulbricht, he's got life in prison for running a darknet market. If you're already facing life in prison for running a darknet market, you might as well have an illegal IPO while you're at it too. And so we built these tools. You can play with it yourself over at mint.bitcoin.com. You don't even have to be a programmer. You can use it yourself just by click, and you can pay these dividend payments. And I think once people figure out that that's possible, that's going to be a really, really big deal. And we saw actually, here's one of the first examples of that. Everybody knows Tether and USDC and these different stable coins. If you have the stable coin in your wallet, you don't earn any interest, you just have the coin. Another exchange, CoinFlex out of the UK, now has it. You can deposit your Tether or USDC with them, and then they issued the stable coin backed by the stable coin on their platform that's then used for the margin lending on their platform. But then like daily or weekly or something, they pay you interest directly on the token. So you can have your stable coin in your own wallet where you have the private keys, but you still get paid interest to the stable coin in your wallet. And so I think the stable coins that pay interest to the stable coin holders while they still have custody of the stable coins, those are the ones that are really going to win out in the end. Because would you rather have Tether that pays you no interest, or a flavor of Tether that pays you interest while you still have the Tether in your own wallet? That's a much bigger deal and much more interesting to the world. And I think we're going to see that. And then you'll have payment processors that start accepting that stable coin. I think that's going to be another big wave of adoption we see in the future here.
And I think that's something we've seen with the growth of DeFi, is that for so long there was this hodl that, like, if you believed in this crypto, you believe that of course it's going to skyrocket in value because of all this amazing thing. It's out of the hands of the government essentially, but for so long, if you want to maintain exposure, you couldn't really do anything with it. But now with the rise of DeFi, you can actually put it into these different protocols and maintain that exposure, even maintain the keys, but still get interest, get rewards, get borrowing, and all these things. So I think that's very exciting. But you did mention Russ Ulbricht, the founder of the Silk Road, and I think it's a story that not enough people understand and know and are familiar with. This idea that this kid started a market, an open market. His goal was not to hurt people. His goal was not to sell any particular thing. He just made a market and let people sell on it as long as they were not hurting anybody. He even had a thing, don't hurt anybody else. And he was charged, I believe, with more than 2 life sentences. He was charged with more than 2 life sentences. And the actual drug dealers, the actual people, no one got more than, I think, 10 or 15 years. There was a Silk Road 2 that came after him that was way more nefarious, way more harmful, and even those founders didn't get nearly the sentences that Ross got. It's really a horrible story when you think about it. And this young kid who did nothing more than just make an open marketplace is going to be spending, as of now, his life in jail. And I really do think that the Free Ross movement and people should really get behind it. Because it's a great injustice. It's really, you're talking about the government having control of your lives and the government being able to print money. The government's essentially taken a life and put him in a cage for the rest of his life.
He's going to die. He's sentenced to die there. Yeah.
It's really horrible. My colleague Asher Westrup Evans actually interviewed his mother. It's a great interview. You should check it out. It's really an incredible story. But if we're talking about that already, we're talking about the government's forcing their will onto the people, not just with Ross, but with Julius Assange, as well as Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden, that's also something incredible, because what he did was he exposed the government was doing something illegal. This was a U.S. citizen who said, hey guys, by the way, the government is breaking the law. And then the government turns around and charges him. They didn't charge themselves. They didn't get in trouble. And by the way, there are whistleblower laws that protect whistleblowers. But they actually charged him, I forgot, but under some espionage or some, they charged him under some specific charge that didn't give him a trial, didn't give him a fair trial. And this is another guy who he can't ever come back. He's hiding in Russia, I believe. When are we going to see?
It's a crazy world we live in.
Yeah. So yeah. When are we going to see a government? I mean, obviously, where you're living, you picked it because you do have those freedoms. But when are we going to see a government that not only allows freedoms but also economic freedoms, where a government's going to say, "Hey, wait a second, we realize this fiat currency thing is just not working. This fractional reserve is not working," and actually see a government take a cryptocurrency as their national currency and actually make their currency actually much more valuable by doing so.
Yeah, I think governments are always going to take and exert as much control over people as people allow them to do so. So it's up to us to build all these systems that give people the power to tell government people, no, I don't consent and I won't go along with this. I'm going to live my own life peacefully and I'm going to leave you alone, but you need to leave me alone too. And right now the police have all the, the guns and tanks and bombs and weapons, but maybe cryptocurrency can help level that playing field there as well, where it gives people the ability to fight back and say, no, I don't consent, and you're not going to be the boss of me any longer. And so there's some really interesting essays out there. There was a really interesting back and forth essay between a guy named Robert Vorman and what's the other, Bob Murphy, an economist. And we republished those on Bitcoin.com recently. I think it's I think the title of it might have been Assassination Politics, but you can read it, and it's a really interesting thing out there. And so maybe that's going to help level the playing field on that in the future. And it'll be interesting to keep an eye on what winds up being built in that area. But at the end of the day, people that value people being able to live their own lives peacefully without being controlled with threats of violence from other people, we need to build the tools and the infrastructure to enable people to do that. And that's one of the things that has me so excited about cryptocurrencies, is because it's one of the key ingredients to do that. So we have 3D printers and cryptocurrencies and drones and all these, and encryption. All of these things are helping enable people to be able to live their own lives peacefully without being controlled by violent strangers.
Mm-hmm. And it's been a wild year. I believe it's about a year ago from today, when COVID, the rumblings of COVID started to take place. It started in China and it slowly spread throughout the world. And it accelerated a lot of trends, a lot of macroeconomic trends, a lot of social trends. Governments have been printing a ridiculous amount of money to try to pump stimulus. But on the other hand, we finally saw how restrictive governments could be. I think when times are good, people didn't realize, the power a government has. They said, oh, we have to pay taxes. Okay, I'll pay some taxes. And what does the government really do? They tell me, I can't buy alcohol if I'm younger than a certain age. But I think with the spread of COVID, a lot of people are waking up, because all of a sudden, whoa, the government's telling me I can't go outside. The government's telling me that I can't work. I can't provide for my family. And I think that this has really made people start to realize, wait a second, I should be paying attention to what my government does and the power it has. So do you see this as being kind of a watershed moment or a tipping point that has woken up a lot of people, and we're going to see some real change going forwards, or will this all just go away and people forget and go about their business like they always do?
I hope it'll be a wake-up moment, but I'm not real optimistic on that. But people need to stop and think. Government isn't some special supernatural entity. It's just people like you or me. And so if I don't have the right to tell my neighbor that he has to stay in his house, I don't have the right to delegate that authority to somebody calling themselves government to tell my neighbor he has to stay in his house. It's all just a bunch of people. And just because some other human beings get together and put on, costumes and work in buildings with flags out in front, they don't have special rights to tell everybody else what they can or can't do. And but of course, they don't teach you that they call them government schools, but a more accurate description would be mandatory youth propaganda camps, because that's exactly what they are. They're mandatory youth propaganda camps in which they indoctrinate young people into believing that the government has the right to boss everybody around and control every aspect of the economy, and literally tell people they're not allowed to go to their own home or go to a restaurant or open a business. It's just absolutely insane. But if you had been taught from a young age that Santa Claus was real, you'd believe that, until somebody pointed out to you that, hey, how would Santa ever even have time to fly to everybody's house in the world and go down the chimney? And hey, where does he even get these flying reindeer from? Well, it's the same with government. They don't have any supernatural ability. They don't have any supernatural authority to boss everybody around, other than people believe it and then they just obey. And if they would stop believing it and stop obeying, it would all come to an end. And I think that would be a giant step forward for all of humankind.
I just want to say to all the children watching, Uncle Roger is just joking, and Santa Claus is real. He's on his way. You're a good kid. I think you're exactly right. And I think the next big point of contention we're going to see is with this announcement of COVID vaccinations. And now I think you don't have to be an idiot. Everyone can see the writing on the wall. It's pretty obvious that certain governments are either going to make these vaccinations mandatory. They're going to force people to take them. They're not going to allow people, whether it be by force or whether it be, hey, you can't leave your house unless you take these vaccinations. And I think that a lot of people, if you look at the latest polls, I believe it's a majority of adults in America do not want to take the vaccination, merely because they don't trust it. They're scared. No one wants to be the guinea pig. And I'm not against vaccinations in general. I'm actually pro-vaccinations in general.
Once they're safe and tested, they've been around for a while.
Yes, exactly. At the end of the day, but I don't want to be the first person to take it. Also, I'm young. I'm not scared of COVID. I'd rather get COVID than potentially a vaccination that hasn't been tested. We don't know the long-term effects of the vaccination. We also don't really know the long-term effects of COVID more than a year. One thing I know has for my age group and my health range, has a 0.00001% fatality rate. I haven't seen the numbers yet on this vaccination. So I'm assuming I know the answer, but when the vaccinations come out, Roger, are you going to be the first in line?
I absolutely will not be the first in line. And I was actually thinking about this in the shower this morning. I think there's going to be a market because I think governments are going to try and force people to have the vaccinations and make them mandatory, or not let you travel if you don't have them. I think some entrepreneurial person out there is going to figure out a way to make a fake, I've been vaccinated, vaccine documentation proofs, and they'll sell them for cryptocurrency on the dark net. I think there's going to be a big market for that. And I think that's a good thing. If you don't own your own body and don't have the right to decide what you do or don't put in your own body, what do you own in life? And I think people need to have that ability to decide for themselves. And if you're so worried about COVID, you can go and get the vaccine. And once you've been vaccinated, what do you care if I have the vaccine or not? You've been vaccinated. Don't worry about me in my life. So, and I'm not anti-vaccine in general one bit, but I sure as heck don't want to be the first one for this thing that's obviously incredibly rushed out. Usually vaccines take a decade or more to get put together. This one they're trying to put together in a few months. No, I'm not going to be one of the first to take it. And yeah. And I think people need to just be able to decide for themselves what they put in their own body.
Shocking answer. And also, we already see it even with the testing. I mean, I'm in South Africa. I flew here last week, and it was mandatory for me to have a test, the COVID test. And what was the proof? It was so funny. The proof that I got the test was a piece of paper, regular piece of paper. I got it in a PDF. I could have changed every single. I could have changed it from a negative to a positive to a negative. I could have changed the name. I was shocked at this is what the government's requiring. Honestly, leave it up to the governments to drop the ball and make it as inefficient as possible. But I was speaking to a blockchain project yesterday called Sharing that does a ID verification on the blockchain. But there's tons of these different blockchain things. If governments really wanted to make sure you took the vaccine and really wanted to make sure you got the test, they would put this on the blockchain. But don't tell them that, because we want the ability to be able to fly, however we want. But Roger, I know you are a very busy man, and I do appreciate you taking the time. But the holidays, this is going to be airing on the holidays, so I'll let you give a quick. What is your holiday wish to the crypto community for 2021 coming up?
I guess my wish is to start building the tools to build more economic freedom for the entire world, because more economic freedom is what makes the world a better place for everybody. So that's what we need, and that's what we want, and that's what I'm here building, and I'd love your help to do it.
Amen, brother. I'm here with you.
Happy
Roger,
New Year, happy all that.
Yeah, Roger, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time. It's always a pleasure speaking to you. And for all of our viewers here at Reimagine 2020, happy holidays, and thanks for watching.